Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night, June 29th, in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to a lot of you that reached out via text or phone call or sent me an email or a message on Twitter just asking about the conditions of this massive derecho event that went through while starting in Nebraska, cutting across Iowa, Missouri, and then into my home state of Illinois. As many of you know, I live just outside of Champaign, right here where the nose of this went through. And at the end of this animation, as the storm was ripping through parts of Indiana and the southern edge down here into parts of Kentucky and Tennessee, I want to point out a couple things. One, the speed at which these storms formed and moved was not well forecast by me this morning. If you watch my morning report, I kind of thought this would be a later in the day event, but as all thunderstorms have the ability to do, the moment they get going, they tend to feed on their own outflow and race across the area that has the most instability. And that's what this one did. Now, it was very healthy in terms of a thunderstorm right here when it crossed the Mississippi River and then headed over to Indiana, but at the very end of this animation, you can see where the storm, what we call, gusted itself out. So notice there's a really well-defined line of storms here, and then once it gets over into Indiana, let's stop it right there, you can now start to see as it's crossing the Ohio River here in the Indiana-Ohio border that the trailing stratiform region on the backside is now separated from the main updraft. And so there's a bit of a disconnect in this system, and they tend to go in these cycles. You also get a very well-defined bookend vortex still spinning around here on the backside too. Now, all the things I'm describing to you here are all a part of what these thunderstorms are composed of. So I'm going to take a squall line, a derecho, and I'm going to cut it in half like a birthday cake. And I want to show you the main components of the updraft of this storm. So as it's just diving into this unstable air, there's air that's being forced to rise. And that air that's rising initially makes a shelf cloud that ends up getting pulled into the main updraft, which sometimes can be so strong that and have so much momentum that it carries itself into the very stratiform and stabilized stratosphere. That's actually why we call it the stratosphere. You have pieces that spread out ahead and behind. We call that the anvil. And then, of course, as you know, whatever goes up has to come back down. So you're going to eventually see on the backside of this storm system is where we form the precipitation. Now, just so you remember, the part of the storm that the radar sees is the precipitation. It doesn't see the cloud. It's not designed to do that. So what you get is this progression of very intense rainfall very near the updraft, and then you get into this trailing stratiform area in the back where you have just your lighter rain that tends to last for a couple of hours. But what we care so much about in the squall line is that oftentimes on the backside of the storm where the downdraft forms, because of the circulation within this storm system, and I'm not going to get into all the meso lows and meso highs, but what forms in this is this back to front jet. We call it the rear inflow jet. And it is what kind of kicks the legs out from under the storm, produces that shelf cloud. A lot of you are so familiar with seeing they look like these, and kind of just tell you that this storm means business. That's what they look like when you cut them in half. If you've ever seen one of these coming toward you, the shelf cloud is often the warning. That's the cloud that when you see it, it's basically the atmosphere saying, hey, listen, you've got just a couple of minutes. I need you to get inside after you take a picture of me and send it to Snodgrass so we can show it in a presentation. This is your 5-minute warning when you start to see this cloud coming over the horizon here. Because what follows it is often a major wind shift and damaging winds. That's what squall lines are known for. So I'd like to show you another picture. Sorry, let's go to this one. One of my former students, brilliant, I'm going to be honest, he might have been the best student I've ever had at the University of Illinois. His name is Zach Wienhoff, and he took these two pictures for me years ago, but I love them. Shelf cloud is approaching. This is in Champaign, but look at the smoke on the smokestack. Now, as I click play, I'm going to draw over this for you and show you that this is the storm breathing in. Watch, there goes the inflow, runs up over the storm's outflow, which is there, and produces the shelf cloud. So you only get clouds and rising air in this case. Then do you notice how when the outflow and the shelf cloud pass over, the winds change directions? That's why right as soon as the shelf cloud hits you, there's a drop in temperature, sometimes up to 20 degrees, and it gets really windy. That is the storm exhaling toward you after sucking all that air in on this side. It's a beautiful thing. Now, the problem with these storms is they do a lot of damage. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that I got permission from over Twitter to show. This is from my colleague, close friend, Andrew Pritchard. He was near Farmer City, Illinois, and he just took some pictures of some of the damage here. If I can get this to pull up here, I apologize. I'm on very slow internet where I am right now. This is what we were worried about. The crop going through very fast growth stages. Of course, we get that cell elongation, and it becomes very susceptible to green snap like this. You can see he's got a few pictures of that. But also my good friend Matt Bennett, who's south of me, Took a couple pictures of his parents' place, just some of the damaged infrastructure down there as well. So this kind of stuff is just, I hate it. I hate that this is what these storms are capable of doing, because what we need out of them is the rain. But as it stands, late in the afternoon on Thursday, we still have a lot of customers in Iowa, 12,000 there, almost 200,000 in Illinois, 242,000 in Indiana, 13,000 in Kentucky, and 26,000 in Tennessee that are without power. If you want to see the storm reports, here's the latest I've got from the SPC. Let's see if they've updated this at all. We're up to 361 reports, the vast majority of them being straight line wind damage here. But there was hail in this as well. Now, this particular storm system, as it raced across this area, you want to know if it kind of met the criteria to be called a derecho. And in addition to producing those strong winds, look at the hail that's happened so far today. So out of Colorado into this corner of Colorado, right along the Kansas-Nebraska border, and then numerous reports of large hail from the cluster storms early and then from the Squall Line. Now, I mentioned a moment ago calling it a derecho. And if you just look at the National Weather Service, I'll show you that in a second. There we go. The National Weather Service's website, here is the definition, okay? If the wind damage swath extends more than 240 miles, which it absolutely has, take a look at that. That's way more than 240 miles. And includes wind gusts of at least 58 miles an hour or greater along most of its length, it may be classified as a derecho. So this is certainly a derecho. And talking with many of my colleagues, I was reminded today that, I showed you this a moment ago, we had an event like this during the drought of 2012 as well. The difference is where this one eventually spread. It went that way. It was much farther north starting and then really hit the eastern Corn Belt and got over to the mid-Atlantic, producing a lot of damage. That one had 1,264 total reports of severe weather. So the difference is, look how much farther back to the west this one began. And we're not done. We're going to see more of this type of weather here as we go forward. So, total precipitation through 4 o'clock this afternoon. Remember, this is just the best we can do. This is mostly radar data, but it's corrected for rain gauges where we have official rain gauges. But we do notice that this hit some really dry places in through here. Zooming in on a couple of those states, this is Nebraska. Remember, this is one of our driest spots in Nebraska that started with these storms today, and they did produce. Some locations picked up over an inch up to 2 inches of total precipitation. And then cutting through Illinois, remember, this was one of the places that has been missed consistently over the last 45 days. Southern Illinois got a shot at some precipitation since May 10th, and then northern Illinois with the previous system. So this kind of shot the gap here, finally bringing in some moisture. And so just to make that point, these were the two areas that we saw this moisture come through today. Now, this is not to take away from what's happening all around this area, but it's just to show you that we finally brought some moisture into that critical spot there. And one other thing I want to show you about this before I kind of move on to the forecast is that I'm going to link this in the notes below. I tried to show you this on Monday night, but the site hadn't fully updated yet. But what I've done is I've come in here and I've chosen to look at the annual summary of tornado reports, wind damage, and large hail. And this goes through June 27th, so this does not include yesterday or today's severe weather. But now we are over double what April and May gave, right? So you can see 4,600 versus 2,300 in both of those months. But this is the new thing I want you to do with this. Click on the month of June. Now the map will just narrow itself down to what's happened in June. So look at the wind damage reports so far. Most of them were down into this corridor earlier in the month. But where these just came in is right here, and they're not yet on this map. But you can look at tornado reports as well. You can also look at your large hail, and hail has been such a story for this corridor for so much of this month, and now we just added a whole bunch more right into this area. So I just wanted to give you some perspective on this, do a quick teach on how these storms are set up if you look at their cross-section, and remind you that this isn't done. We have air quality issues stretched throughout much of the Great Lakes Basin into New England. This is all excessive heat warning, excessive heat advisory. There's still severe thunderstorm warning into this, severe thunderstorm watch here. And don't forget, there is a back side of this. We're still watching more severe weather. Later on, we're going to talk about temperatures, and this is very important, this heat that's going up here into the western United States when thinking about where this whole pattern is going to move from this point. But the storms are going to continue. This is for the rest of the day today. So we're going to watch the leading edge of that squall continue to move into the Tennessee Valley, out of the Ohio Valley, and the storms are already blowing up on the backside of this here in Colorado and Wyoming. And notice this again. As we go into the day on the 30th, same arcing area over that larger ridge. These are all ridge riding storms like we've been discussing. And then this is as we get into the 1st of July. You can see it pushing here over to the Ohio Valley, Eastern Corn Belt, Appalachian Mountains, Tennessee Valley. So some high resolution modeling. Let's just pick this up late tonight going into tomorrow morning. Same scenario. See that? See where the storms are going into early tomorrow morning? We play this forward. We go into the afternoon and evening. We're just going to watch again for another setup to start to deliver the risk of severe storms moving into this area. A lot of severe storms in the plains. We then play through into Saturday midday. This is round, I think this will be at least round number 3 of storms coming through here. And you just notice that that whole setup, it's all ring of fire coming around this particular ridge in this particular area. And that's what we're going to watch for. It's this area on repeat all the way through Saturday and even into Sunday. So we're not done by any stretch with this next few days of severe weather. But let's get to the bigger picture. I like to cover that more in these in-depth reports at night. And this is the new 7-day outlook from the WPC. So now we can really see that setup. It's right there. Okay, sorry. Let's do that again. There it is. I forgot I was drawing with the arrow on there. But this is bringing in rains into the kind of the last missing piece from this time period that hasn't at least gotten one shot at rain. So we're going to watch that very carefully going forward. The European model, 12Z run. Let's just play this out there today, 7. There it is again. That's a very similar look to what you just saw from the WPC. Now there have been a few things that have changed. If you look at the next 7 days in terms of anomalous precipitation, we've gone drier in this area. So let's do something we haven't done in a while, which is to give you that side-by-side panel here, European right, GFS on the left. As I play this forward, we've already seen through Saturday, so there's the next few rounds of storms going through on Saturday. We know we're watching this low. It's in both models curling up here on Sunday. And the difference has been that the newest runs, why they're a little drier, is that the models have kind of weakened the front that's going to stretch out in this direction. There will still be storms firing on this front, but it's about the timing and the available moisture to those storms. And the newest model runs from both the GFS and the European are just less aggressive with it. So we're going to watch right in through here, but just take note that there was a bit of a drier trend overall. So next Monday and Tuesday is when we're going to watch that. Now, as you can imagine, that's going to leave a lingering frontal boundary that will then get into the Midwest. And it's really well resolved in both models out here to, this is almost a week out. This is next Wednesday. And as I always mention, look at how much better the European model does with the storms over the southeast versus the GFS. So what's going to go on here is that system's going to pull through. And as it does, it's going to bring in some relief, going to bring in some cooler weather, but storms all along the front of it. We're no longer having the difficulty of getting moisture into places, plus getting the flow to initialize and create these storms. So next 10 days, this is the newest update from the ECMWF. Next 10 days, probability of getting at least an inch of rainfall. We continue to see those same areas showing up wetter. A lot of the Mississippi, Ohio, Tennessee basin, then of course this part of the Missouri River getting right here through the Midwest and all the way into New England. If we pop that up to 2 inches, let this reset here for you. There you go. This is, sorry about that. This is the probability of getting 2 inches in the next 10 days. So what a turnaround we've seen overall in this pattern. Now the big question is, how long does this last? Do we continue to see ridge riding storms kind of come through and buy time or save the day completely? To think about that, I want to take you out next to what the week 2 forecast is looking like. So both the CPC and the European model and the GFS, so all 3 of these models have continued to give us that same trend. Just like we talked about this morning, the European model is the drier of the 3 when looking through this quarter, including the Canadian Prairie down into the upper Midwest. So we need to watch that carefully as the potential area that's going to get missed more often going forward. Because as we said, there was already a bit of a drier trend in that area. And as you saw in the probability maps, thank goodness this spot got good rains in the last week to 10 days because they are showing up with drier signals overall. Now, what about the temperatures? Well, this afternoon, as I was making this was all rain cool there, but look at the heat, 100 degrees in Kansas City. The only thing keeping St. Louis cooler was cloud cover and rain, but very hot down into this part of Kansas and Missouri, and even hotter as you just keep sliding farther and farther to the south. Now, over the next 5 days, We're going to watch that ridge open up in the west, and that is why we see on average temperatures there somewhere in the 10 to up to 20 degrees above average overall. And to show you what's concerning me about this is that now we're beginning to see these very high evaporation rates in Texas, the Southwest, the Central Valley of California, and also the Columbia Basin, Snake River Valley. These are, let me blow that or shrink that so you can see this better, but these are evaporation rates that are 2 to 4 inches. I need to fix this color bar. I'm so sorry. The white is greater than 3 inches of evaporation in a week. So that's where that heat seems to be going. So if you look out there and say why, well, by day 10, we have ridges flanking North America. Where have we had? This ridge has been over the Aleutian Islands, and this ridge was over eastern Canada. So that's what put all this heat into place. Well, not anymore. We're seeing ridges here, ridges there, and the flow's coming around, and it's got a lot more momentum through the United States. And that's why when we look out there past that time frame, notice, where's the heat? It's going to kind of paint the corners. That's the closest spot to those two ridges. So what we end up getting is flow that comes in and around, but doesn't have the big pronounced ridge here anymore. So out into week 2, what improved? Just better flow, but this duration of this heat into California isn't going to last long. It's there now, but it's not going to last through the whole month of July. And we see that it's going to be the Pacific Northwest that probably has the highest heat overall going forward. Because if I play this out there, this is day 10 through 15. You can see the differences here. Okay? From there, this is the update from the CPC. They're on the outlook here for the 7th through the 10th for excessive heat in the Pacific Northwest. They're watching from the 8th through the 13th into this region, and the hottest temperatures down into Arizona and New Mexico. So this would suggest the pattern doing something a bit different, and it's going to change here in the Gulf of Alaska. So let's have a talk about this pattern change, because look at the precipitation risk. It has been so long since I've seen this. But from the 7th through the 10th, they've now identified a huge chunk of the central part of the U.S. through the Ohio Valley into New England and all the way down through the Mississippi Basin and all of its tributaries from the 7th to the 10th having a slight risk of excessive precipitation. So is this all driven by ridges? Is that the case? It seems to be, because I cannot find another piece of the flow that would tell me other than this, right? To watch for ridge placement. It's summer. The momentum's out of the flow. Watch, just watch. Because the MJO collapses, we see no major indicators of either weaker or stronger momentum here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's just gone. And so therefore, we just have to think about what the pattern's really going to be up to. So stretching this out longer term, take a look. Out here to the 3rd week of July, the models are just favoring some sense of a ridge here and flow coming over the top of it. But the only thing that is anomalous to this is the deeper low pressure that is spinning around the North Pole. This is actually helping to set up a better contrast in total temperature from the equator to the pole, meaning we're going to get more momentum out of this. Now, where's the Bermuda High? It is not here. There's no Bermuda High there. The Bermuda High is still very much displaced. It's still way over here, but what's come back is just flow. There's just flow. That's it. And that's all we can ask to look for going out this far. That's it. So what I'll say is the new European model, okay, it's got the risk of drier where that ridge may be replaced, but over the top of it, storms coming into this area. What I'm concerned about is the Canadian Prairie through the upper Midwest. Does this area stay too far to the north of the best flow to get these storms to come through this area? There is the chance that that may occur. So I will be focusing a lot on here and here, while everything runs in between just like this and makes the turn. Now, I don't have any new tropical updates for you, but I'm going to make a statement here. This goes out from July 7th to August 7th. Excuse me, I should have told you that before I started. And I know you're looking down here seeing the Gulf look like that. Remember, the European weeklies cannot pick up on that longer range tropical activity. So we just need to understand that we could get a system in here in the tropics that could light this up. And regardless of what any model says, we tend to get daily convection from the sea breeze right along the coast. So let's watch for that quite carefully as well. On the temperature side of this, there's an interesting outlook for this time period, the 7th of July through the 7th of August. And once this gets going, there it is. I want you to note how the models are not bringing in excessive heat here. That is an indicator that they're really trying to set up this ridge feature there. and flow rolling over the top. No heat expected right now, long duration heat into New England either. So maybe the pattern is going to get stuck like this for another 6 weeks. That is a possibility. And that's what I'm going to have to just stare at, keep forecasting over this weekend to see if it's actually the case going forward. Because I'm going to tell you, the bigger picture things in this pattern haven't changed, which means persistence might be the best guidance. You could make an argument that we have broken away from where we were when that Texas ridge developed. But is it going to persist? That's the big question, because I don't want it to persist for my friends in Texas. But to continue to break a drought in the Midwest, that seems to be the way it's going to happen this year because the Bermuda high is of no help. What are the other big features? Well, this has got me worried. This is still cold in here. And that's part of that negative Pacific meridional mode. And that would suggest that this area, this whole area in the lower 48 needs to be aware that the pattern could break back over to hot and dry there. El Niño continues. It's there. It has not quit. The warmer water has pushed up to British Columbia here. That's a change. But we still have a whole lot of warm water in the Atlantic covering a big area, and that's what's preventing the Bermuda high from coming back. So I look at this and I'm telling you that right now I'm going to use persistence as my main forecast guidance. I'm going to put some trust back in these models because they have been doing a better job as of late. I love the new updates from the European model, but I want to make it clear that there is going to be very low accuracy and skill looking out there beyond 10 days as we go forward. So let's do a 10-day outlook to finish this up for the rest of the world. Big concern, heat coming in here in the near term. Cooler on this side of the Rockies. That's going to shift. We know that's going to shift day 10 through 15. Take a look at what's going on in China. This is a wild card for me. This is something I'm going to be watching carefully. And the reason I'm going to watch China so carefully is because we've now seen the models again go drier here. And that North China plain has now had a dry signal. It's been dry as of late. The storms are to the south of it on the Mayu front, which is this frontal feature right here. And that could cause flooding on the Yangtze and drought developing just a couple hundred miles to the north of it in the North China plain. Please keep an eye out on that. We're still seeing quite a bit of thunderstorm activity across southern Europe. We can also see that normally, as we expect, it's very dry down into South America, and harvest is not being hampered by really cold weather, but still very wet coming across Australia, especially into Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria. That's an area we need to keep an eye on because here they are in winter, El Niño's going, and they're not expecting this wet conditions. So a lot of things we got to keep our eye on here internationally. The last thing I'll tell you is this. Watch this area carefully. It is complexes of storms that roll off of this that become the storm systems that race across this part of the open ocean going forward into this month of July and getting into course into August and September. And that's going to be what we think could be a very active hurricane season, primarily driven by these very warm ocean temperatures in place here. So we got several things to watch, and that's why I love doing these videos for you. Again, thanks to all of you that kind of reached out to me today. I will just keep on top of this. I look forward to talking to many of you again in the morning. Till then, have a good one. Thanks.